The gala hall sparkled with light, crystal chandeliers reflecting tiny rainbows across the polished floor. People moved gracefully, dressed in gowns and tuxedos, laughter and soft music filling the room. Amidst all this, a woman sat in a corner, her face hidden behind delicate fingers, trying to hide her tears. She had arrived hoping for a quiet evening, something to distract her from the tension that had been building in her life. But she hadn't expected to meet the woman who had been haunting her days, the woman everyone whispered about with a mix of fascination and fear. The mistress appeared like a flame, drawing every eye in the room. She moved with confidence, her dress catching the light and shimmering with every step. She had a way of entering a room that made people notice her instantly, and tonight was no different. When she spotted the crying woman, a slow, calculating smile spread across her face. She walked over, heels clicking sharply on the marble floor, her presence alone silencing a few nearby conversations. The air seemed to tense around them as guests began to notice the impending confrontation. "Oh, look at you," the mistress said, voice dripping with mock sympathy. "Crying in a place like this. How tragic." Her words were loud enough for a few people nearby to hear, and she leaned closer, lowering her voice in a way that made it feel like she was sharing a private joke with everyone present. The woman tried to keep her composure, taking a slow, deep breath, hoping the mistress would lose interest and leave. But the mistress was relentless. "Do you think anyone even notices when you cry?" she asked, tilting her head, a cruel smile tugging at her lips. "I mean, it's hard to see you and not feel bored." Laughter bubbled from a small group of onlookers, and the crying woman's heart sank further. She wished she could disappear, melt into the floor, or simply leave without drawing more attention. Guests started to glance around uncomfortably. Some didn't know where to look, not wanting to take sides, while others were drawn in by the drama, whispering among themselves. The room that had moments ago been filled with polite chatter and soft music was now tense, every eye sneaking glances at the scene unfolding. The crying woman felt the heat rise in her cheeks. She wanted to shrink, to escape, but the mistress wasn't done yet. Her mocking words were precise, meant to cut and sting. "You really thought you could hide here, didn't you?" the mistress continued, her voice sharp and deliberate. "But crying like that, oh, everyone sees it, they feel it, and they laugh at you, or at least they should." The woman's hands trembled slightly. She had spent so many nights imagining this very humiliation, and now it was real, right in front of dozens of people. She felt trapped, the room suddenly much too large, the people much too close, their attention weighing on her shoulders. She glanced around, hoping someone might step in, but it seemed everyone was frozen, caught in a moment of discomfort and curiosity. A waiter walked by carrying champagne, carefully avoiding the tension in the corner, while a group near the center of the hall whispered and giggled behind fans and drinks. The mistress noticed the onlookers and seemed to feed off their attention. She took a step back, then forward, circling the woman as though inspecting a display. "You always look like this, don't you? Always on the edge of tears?" she said softly, almost mockingly intimate. "It's really quite pathetic in a way that's almost amusing." The woman could feel her composure slipping. She wanted to respond, to tell the mistress to leave her alone, but words refused to come. Her voice felt trapped, swallowed by the echo of the room and the weight of the mistress's presence. The mistress's smile widened as she leaned even closer, whispering words meant to humiliate. "Do you ever wonder why people don't take you seriously? Maybe it's because of this. Because everyone knows you can't handle even a little embarrassment without falling apart." Each word was deliberate, like a needle pricking at the fragile bubble of confidence the woman had tried so hard to maintain. People were starting to murmur now, some shaking their heads, others glancing around, unsure if they should intervene. There was a strange electricity in the room, a mixture of tension, curiosity, and silent judgment. The crying woman tried to steady herself, taking a deep breath and blinking rapidly to keep the tears from spilling over. But the mistress wasn't giving her the chance to recover. Every step she took, every word she spoke, was designed to keep the woman on edge, to make her feel small, to make the room seem bigger and colder than it was. At one point, the mistress tapped the woman on the shoulder, a gesture that should have been polite, but instead felt like a challenge. You really thought tonight would be easy for you, didn't you? That no one would notice you. Her laughter was soft, cruel, and it seemed to hang in the air, echoing slightly off the tall walls. Guests glanced at one another, some trying to look away, others caught in the unfolding spectacle, their faces a mix of curiosity and discomfort. The crying woman's hands clenched in her lap. She wanted to run, to hide, to escape the spotlight she never asked for. But she couldn't move without drawing more attention. She felt every eye in the room, every whisper, every smirk directed at her. And still, the mistress pressed on, enjoying the power she had in that moment, the ability to make someone else feel small, even in a room full of people who were supposed to be civilized and kind. The mistress circled back, placing a hand on her hip, leaning slightly, as though savoring the moment. "You know, I almost admire you," she said, her voice dripping with false sincerity. "It takes a lot to sit here and let everyone see you like this. But don't think for a second that it changes anything. You're still you." The words were carefully chosen, each one designed to sting, to remind the woman of every insecurity she had tried to hide. The woman's heart raced. She tried to steady her breathing, telling herself that this was just a moment, that it would pass. But the mistress had a way of making it feel endless, each second stretching out, each glance and smirk a reminder of the humiliation. Guests were now whispering more openly, some offering sympathetic glances, others exchanging knowing smirks, all captivated by the scene. The crying woman felt a strange mix of shame, fear, and helplessness, wishing she could disappear. As the mistress prepared to speak again, the music in the background seemed to falter, a subtle pause that drew even more attention to the corner of the room. The woman's hands were shaking now, tears threatening to spill no matter how much she tried to control them. The mistress leaned in one last time, a whisper meant only for her, carrying the weight of mockery and triumph. "Enjoy your night, darling. It's just beginning, and everyone is watching." The words hit hard, leaving the woman feeling exposed and alone, even amidst a crowd. But somewhere deep inside, a tiny spark of defiance flickered. She realized that while the mistress had power over her emotions in that moment, the story wasn't over. She could hold on, survive, and find a way to reclaim her dignity. The hall around her continued to sparkle with light, but for the first time, she straightened her back slightly, a quiet acknowledgement that she was still there, still present, still capable of facing the storm that had just begun. The mistress moved around the gala with ease, her confidence like a cloak she wore to command the room. Every glance she received seemed to fuel her, every whisper of attention a small victory. She lingered near the woman she had mocked, circling her as if savoring each moment. Her laughter was soft but sharp, carrying across the polished floor, making some guests glance uncomfortably at the scene. The crying woman tried to regain composure. She dabbed at her tears with a small handkerchief and straightened her gown. She could feel the weight of the mistress's gaze, heavy and calculated. The woman knew the mistress thrived on attention and humiliation, but she also understood that her own reaction gave the mistress power. She focused on steadying her breath, trying to appear calm despite the turmoil inside. The room was alive with chatter and music, but for her, it felt like a battlefield, every movement and every glance a potential threat. Guests whispered among themselves. Some were appalled by the mistress's behavior, unable to believe someone could be so cruel in public. Others seemed drawn to the drama, watching intently as the confrontation continued. The mistress noticed the audience and allowed herself a small smile of satisfaction. She knew how to manipulate the room to make herself the center of attention. She had done it countless times before, and tonight was no exception. "Do you always look so fragile?" the mistress asked, her voice almost soft, but each word was sharp like a knife. "I've seen people cry before, but you really take it to another level. It's almost impressive." The words were designed to wound, to make the woman feel exposed and powerless. She could hear a few stifled laughs nearby, and her stomach knotted tighter. She wanted to disappear, to escape the spotlight that had become a harsh and relentless glare. The mistress leaned in closer, lowering her voice as though sharing a secret with the woman. You know, it's not even about me. People will judge you anyway. This is just giving them more to talk about. Isn't that exciting? Her words dripped with mockery, and she tilted her head slightly, eyes gleaming with amusement. The woman's hands trembled as she gripped the edges of her gown. She tried to focus on her breathing, counting in her mind to keep herself grounded. The humiliation was sharp, but she refused to let it break her entirely. Nearby, other guests shifted uncomfortably. A few murmured softly to each other, casting anxious glances at the unfolding scene. Some wanted to intervene but felt unsure how. The gala was a place for elegance and social politeness, and openly confronting someone, even in defense of another, could cause more trouble than it solved. Yet, the tension was palpable, and everyone present could feel it. A quiet storm brewing amidst the glittering surroundings. The mistress didn't seem to notice the discomfort she caused in others. She thrived on it, each whisper, each sideways glance reinforcing her sense of control. She stepped back slightly and then moved again, her movements deliberate, almost choreographed. She had rehearsed this in her mind countless times, knowing exactly how to humiliate without crossing certain lines. Her power lay in subtlety and precision, in creating discomfort without anyone being able to accuse her openly. "Do you really think anyone cares about your tears?" she asked again, her voice soft, taunting. "I mean, look around. People are smiling, enjoying the evening, and here you are, breaking down. It's quite a sight." Her words were designed to isolate, to make the woman feel like she was the only one exposed, the only one vulnerable. The woman swallowed hard, fighting the lump in her throat. She tried to steady herself, knowing that her own reaction would determine how long this would continue. The mistress's eyes sparkled with amusement as she noticed a few guests whispering and glancing at her. She used their reactions to her advantage, knowing that her display of dominance over another human being commanded attention. It was a cruel dance, one she had perfected over years of social maneuvering. She enjoyed seeing people caught in her orbit, unsure of whether to intervene or watch. The woman at the center of this attention was the perfect target, vulnerable and visibly distressed. For a moment, the crying woman felt completely trapped. She looked around, hoping for some support, some friend or ally who might step in. But no one moved. The silence around her was suffocating, and every second stretched endlessly. She felt exposed, her vulnerability on display, and it was overwhelming. But deep down, a small flame of resolve flickered. She reminded herself that this was temporary, that she could survive this moment, and that she did not have to let this woman define her. The mistress took a slow step closer, tilting her head and letting a faint smile play on her lips. "I almost admire your bravery," she said, voice soft but dripping with sarcasm. "To sit here, crying, and let everyone see, it's almost artful." Her words were carefully calculated to sting, to keep the woman off balance and under her control. The crying woman's hands shook slightly as she clutched her gown, tears threatening to spill again despite her best efforts. The surrounding guests continued to watch, some whispering to one another, others pretending not to notice. The tension in the room was thick, almost tangible. The mistress thrived on this energy, each glance, each murmur, fueling her sense of superiority. She was like a predator, circling her prey, and she took her time, savoring every reaction she could elicit. The crying woman took a deep breath and tried to focus on something else, anything to regain her composure. She thought about the music, the chandeliers, the soft laughter in the background, trying to anchor herself in the normalcy around her. But the mistress was relentless. She leaned closer again, whispering words meant to wound, each one precise and sharp. "Do you think anyone will take you seriously after this?" she asked. "Do you think they see you as strong or capable? No, they see you like this, fragile and exposed." The woman's heart pounded, but but she forced herself to look up slightly, meeting the mistress's eyes with a quiet defiance. She did not speak, but in that moment, she began to reclaim a small portion of her dignity. She would not give the mistress the satisfaction of watching her crumble completely. The mistress seemed to notice the subtle shift, her smile faltering slightly. She leaned back, feigning casual interest, but the sharpness in her eyes remained. She was aware that her target was not completely broken, and that realization sent a small ripple of irritation through her. She thrived on complete control, and the woman's quiet defiance, though small, disrupted her rhythm. Guests continued to watch, some leaning in slightly, sensing the tension but unsure how it would unfold. The mistress's power lay in manipulation, in reading reactions and adjusting her behavior accordingly. She used the crowd to reinforce her position, knowing that people were drawn to drama and discomfort. And yet, she also had to navigate carefully, ensuring that her actions did not cross a line that could bring consequences. The crying woman's mind raced. She thought about leaving, about escaping the gaze of the mistress and the weight of the room. But she also realized that fleeing would give the mistress exactly what she wanted: a victory, a display of dominance. So she stayed, quietly holding herself together, letting her inner strength grow even as her outward appearance trembled. The mistress finally stepped back slightly, her eyes still locked on the woman. She allowed herself a small, satisfied smile, believing she had the upper hand. But the woman had changed slightly, a small yet significant shift in posture and expression, signaling that while she was vulnerable, she was not defeated. The mistress could see it, and it unsettled her more than she wanted to admit. As the music played softly in the background and guests continued to watch from a distance, the crying woman began to feel a subtle sense of control return. She realized that she could endure this, that she could survive this night, and that the mistress's power over her was not absolute. It was a small victory, almost imperceptible, but it mattered. The night was far from over, and the drama was still unfolding, but she had found a spark of resilience within herself that no one could take away. The tension in the gala hall was thick, almost suffocating. The mistress had been circling the woman for what felt like hours, her smug smile and carefully chosen words keeping everyone watching. Guests whispered among themselves, some concerned, some entertained, and some unsure where their loyalty lay. The crying woman sat quietly, trying to steady herself, her breath slow and deliberate, her hands resting in her lap. She had learned to endure the mistress's taunts, holding onto a quiet strength she barely knew she had. Suddenly, a murmur ran through the room. The sound was subtle at first, almost like the flutter of wings, but it grew quickly as more people turned toward the entrance. The woman's heart skipped a beat. She couldn't see yet who had arrived, but the energy in the room shifted instantly. Even the mistress, who had seemed untouchable moments ago, paused mid-step and looked toward the source of the commotion. Her smile faltered slightly, replaced with a flicker of uncertainty. The doors at the far end of the hall opened wide, and a group entered. Their presence was commanding, yet quiet, exuding elegance and authority. They moved with confidence, their steps deliberate, as if the room itself was aware of their arrival. The crowd instinctively gave them space, a respectful hush falling over the murmuring whispers. Every eye in the hall turned toward them, and the atmosphere changed. The mistress's smugness wavered, replaced with the smallest hint of fear, just enough to unsettle her. The woman felt a surge of hope. She recognized them instantly. Her family, people of immense influence and respect, people whose reputation and presence could shift any room. Their arrival was unexpected, and the power they radiated was palpable. The mistress took a step back, her previous confidence shaken as she watched the family approach. She realized, perhaps too late, that the dynamic had changed entirely. The family moved gracefully through the hall, acknowledging a few guests with polite nods but keeping their focus on the scene unfolding at the corner where the woman sat. The whispers grew louder, more frantic, as the audience sensed a turning point. The mistress's eyes darted nervously between the woman and the approaching figures, her earlier arrogance slipping like sand through fingers. She had expected to dominate the evening, But the arrival of the family was a curve she hadn't anticipated. The crying woman's hands stopped trembling slightly. A sense of calm washed over her, though her heart still raced. She straightened her back fully, lifting her chin, the smallest spark of courage igniting inside her. The family's presence alone gave her strength. It was a silent promise that she was not alone, that the power of love, respect, and loyalty was on her side. The mistress, who had thrived on isolation and vulnerability, now faced a wall she could not penetrate. Guests watched as the family approached, a subtle but undeniable aura of command enveloping them. The mistress tried to mask her unease, adjusting her posture and smoothing her dress, but the tension in her shoulders betrayed her. She had relied on fear and mockery to maintain control, but the sudden arrival of powerful allies disrupted her carefully constructed dominance. She now had to reconsider her next move. The family stopped a few feet away from the woman, their presence forming a protective barrier without any words. Their gaze was steady, calm, and unyielding. The mistress's attempts at intimidation seemed suddenly insignificant in comparison. The room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next moment of interaction. Even the music and chatter softened, a subtle acknowledgement of the shift in authority. The mistress finally spoke, her voice a bit sharper than before, trying to regain control. "Well, this is unexpected," she said, her tone forced and slightly strained. "It seems you have quite the support system." There was an edge of false cheerfulness, but the underlying tension was clear. She realized that the dynamic had changed, that her previous power over the woman was no longer absolute. The woman looked up at her family with a mix of relief and gratitude. Their silent support bolstered her, grounding her in a way she hadn't felt before. She no longer felt completely exposed. Instead, she felt a quiet confidence, a sense of security that came from knowing she was not alone. The mistress's eyes flickered between the woman and her family, and the slightest hesitation crossed her face. The family's presence alone was a statement, a reminder of respect, influence, and unity. They did not need to speak loudly or make grand gestures. Their posture, the way they held themselves, the quiet assurance in their eyes, all of it conveyed power. The mistress, who had thrived on public humiliation and psychological dominance, was suddenly on uncertain ground. She had underestimated the force that family presence could bring, the kind of authority that required no words but commanded attention. The guests in the hall sensed it too. The whispers grew, conversations paused, and the eyes that had been riveted on the mistress slowly shifted toward the family. The dynamics had changed, and everyone present felt the shift, subtle yet profound. The mistress, once the center of attention, was now facing a formidable presence that no amount of charm or mockery could easily counter. The woman felt a surge of quiet triumph. She had endured the mistress's taunts, held herself together, and now, with her family by her side, she felt a sense of empowerment she hadn't imagined possible. The mistress's previous attempts to humiliate her seemed almost petty in comparison to the calm authority that had just entered the room. The contrast was stark, and it shifted the perception of everyone present. For the first time in the evening, the mistress seemed uncertain. Her carefully constructed demeanor wavered, her smile forced, her movements less fluid. She had relied on her control over the woman, but that control was slipping. The power of family, of respect and unity, was proving to be stronger than mockery and arrogance. The hall was no longer hers to command. The balance had shifted. The family moved closer, their attention focused entirely on the woman. They did not speak harshly or confrontationally. Their presence was enough to communicate protection and authority. The mistress, noticing the subtle but undeniable barrier, attempted one last display of confidence, but it lacked the conviction it had before. She realized that the evening had taken a turn she hadn't expected, and the audience around her was watching closely. The woman took a slow, deliberate breath, feeling the strength of her family and the subtle support of the room. She no longer felt completely exposed. The mistress's words, once so sharp and cutting, began to lose their power. The woman had survived the storm of humiliation, and now she could face the aftermath with a newfound sense of courage. The energy in the room had shifted, and the mistress was beginning to understand that her reign of intimidation had limits. Guests continued to observe, some openly impressed by the family's quiet authority, others whispering about the mistress's faltering composure. The room had transformed from a place of tension and mockery into a space where respect, dignity, and solidarity held sway. The crying woman, though still emotional, now felt supported and capable, a stark contrast to the isolation she had felt moments before. The mistress took a final step back, her confidence shaken. She had relied on the woman's vulnerability to maintain her dominance, but with the family present, that vulnerability was gone. The power dynamics had shifted completely, leaving her uncertain and exposed. The woman, now supported and emboldened, could see that the mistress's influence was no longer absolute. As the family stood close by, the woman felt a quiet but profound sense of relief. She had endured, she had remained composed, and she had gained strength from the presence of those who truly cared for her. The mistress, once the center of attention, now faced a reality she hadn't anticipated. The gala, which had begun as a display of mockery and humiliation, had turned into a testament to the power of support, presence, and resilience. The atmosphere in the gala had shifted completely. The mistress, who had once been so confident and commanding, now looked tense and uncertain. She was used to controlling the room with a mix of charm, intimidation, and calculated cruelty. But the arrival of the woman's family had changed everything. Their calm authority and subtle power had shifted the focus away from her, leaving her exposed in a way she had never expected. The family did not approach aggressively. They did not raise their voices or make dramatic gestures. Their presence alone was enough to command attention. The mistress, who had been circling and mocking the woman, suddenly realized that she had underestimated the power of family and respect. Her smile faltered, and her movements grew hesitant, as if she were unsure how to proceed. Guests watched the scene with a mix of curiosity and admiration. The whispers and stifled gasps from earlier were replaced with a tense silence. People could sense that something significant was unfolding, that the balance of power in the room had shifted. The mistress tried to recover, adjusting her posture and smoothing her dress, but the subtle tension in her shoulders betrayed her. "I didn't expect company," the mistress said, her voice carefully measured. She attempted a polite tone, but the underlying tension was clear. She realized that she could no longer dominate the woman in the same way, that the presence of her family had leveled the playing field. Her previous words, once so cutting and effective, now seemed hollow. The woman felt a surge of relief and quiet pride. She had endured the public humiliation, held herself together despite the mistress's relentless taunts, and now she could face the situation with the support of her family. She straightened her back, lifted her chin, and met the gaze of the mistress with a newfound confidence. The audience could see the subtle shift, the reclaiming of dignity and strength. The family moved closer, surrounding the woman with a subtle but unmistakable presence. They did not speak harshly or confrontationally, but their attention was focused entirely on the mistress and her behavior. The mistress's attempts at intimidation were now ineffective. Every word she had used to belittle and humiliate the woman seemed to lose power in the face of the family's quiet authority. The audience could feel the change in energy. What had been a scene of tension and discomfort had transformed into a moment of justice and support. Guests whispered among themselves, some nodding in approval at the woman's resilience and the family's silent protection. The mistress, who had thrived on attention and control, now found herself on uncertain ground, her previous confidence undermined. The mistress took a hesitant step back, trying to regain composure. She looked around the room, hoping to find allies or sympathetic faces, but the audience's attention was firmly fixed on the woman and her family. The subtle shift in power was evident to everyone present. The mistress, who had enjoyed the thrill of public humiliation, now felt the sting of exposure and vulnerability. The woman's heart raced, but she focused on maintaining calm. She had survived the mistress's initial attacks, and now she could stand with dignity. Her family's presence reinforced her strength, giving her the courage to face the situation without fear. She realized that the mistress's power had always been contingent on isolation and vulnerability. With her family by her side, that power was diminished. The mistress tried to speak again, her voice slightly strained. "I see you have support," she said, her tone a mixture of forced politeness and irritation. She attempted to regain control, but her words lacked the confidence they had held earlier. The audience sensed her uncertainty, and the effect was immediate. The mistress, once the center of attention, was now struggling to maintain her composure. The woman took a deep breath and allowed herself a moment of quiet triumph. She had endured the mocking, the whispers, and the scrutiny, and now she was standing tall with the support of those who truly cared for her. The mistress's attempts to dominate and humiliate were now powerless, and the woman could finally feel a sense of relief and empowerment. The family, maintaining their calm presence, communicated their support without words. Their steady gaze and composed demeanor sent a clear message to the mistress. Her behavior was unacceptable, and the woman would not be left to endure it alone. The mistress, recognizing the shift in authority, could do little but watch and adjust her tactics. Guests continued to observe, some openly impressed by the woman's resilience, others whispering about the mistress's faltering composure. The room had transformed from a space of tension and discomfort into one where respect, dignity, and support were evident. The woman, though still emotional, felt a newfound sense of control and confidence. The mistress attempted one final display of charm and influence, trying to regain the attention she had lost. But it was clear that the power dynamics had changed irrevocably. The audience was no longer captivated by her arrogance. Instead, they were witnessing the strength of the woman and the quiet authority of her family. The mistress's previous tactics, once so effective, were now transparent and ineffective. The woman, feeling the support and presence of her family, allowed herself a small, private smile. She had endured, she had maintained her composure, and she had reclaimed her dignity. The mistress, who had once seemed invincible in her ability to humiliate, was now confronted with the limits of her influence. The gala, once a stage for mockery, had become a testament to resilience, support, and quiet strength. As the evening continued, the mistress withdrew slightly, her presence less commanding. She had lost the subtle control she had relied upon, and the audience could see it. The woman, supported by her family, now stood confidently, reclaiming her space and her sense of self. The power of unity and support had overcome the mistress's arrogance, leaving a clear impression on everyone present. The gala hall, once filled with tension and whispers of discomfort, now resonated with a different energy. Guests admired the woman's resilience and the quiet authority of her family. The mistress, facing the reality of her diminished influence, could do little but accept the shift. The scene had changed, and the lesson was clear. Respect, dignity, and support could overcome arrogance and cruelty. The woman, once at the center of humiliation, now stood tall, empowered, and resilient. The gala continued, but the energy had changed completely. The mistress, who had entered the evening full of confidence and arrogance, now moved cautiously. She was no longer the center of attention, and the room seemed to shrink around her, every guest quietly aware of the shift in power. The woman, once the subject of public humiliation, now stood tall with her family nearby, a sense of calm and strength radiating from her. The woman felt a quiet satisfaction. She had endured the mocking, the whispers, and the stares. She had maintained her composure even when the mistress tried to break her spirit. Now, with her family's subtle but undeniable support, she felt a sense of victory that was both private and public. She had reclaimed her dignity, and the room had witnessed it. The audience seemed to recognize the triumph, a collective acknowledgement that the mistress's cruelty could not prevail against unity and resilience. Guests whispered softly among themselves, sharing impressions of the evening. Some expressed admiration for the woman's strength and composure. Others marveled at the family's quiet authority and the way they had shifted the room's energy without confrontation. The mistress, who had once commanded attention effortlessly, now struggled to maintain her poise. Her smile was forced, her movements careful, as if she were aware of the scrutiny she now faced. The woman glanced at her family, a small smile of gratitude crossing her lips. They had arrived at the perfect moment, their presence alone speaking volumes. No words were necessary. Their support had been clear from the beginning. The mistress, who had relied on intimidation and mockery, could see that her tactics had failed. The woman had survived, endured, and emerged with strength, and the audience could sense it. The mistress finally realized that she could not regain control of the situation. Her previous attempts at humiliation were now powerless, her presence overshadowed by the quiet authority of the family and the resilience of the woman. She moved back slightly, her eyes darting around the room, searching for an escape, a way to regain some semblance of influence. But the room had changed, and there was no path back to the power she once held. The woman, feeling the support and love surrounding her, allowed herself a deep breath. She had been vulnerable, exposed, and humiliated, but she had faced it all with quiet strength. The mistress's arrogance had been confronted not with anger or aggression, but with dignity, composure, and unity. It was a lesson in resilience, a testament to the power of support and presence. The woman's heart swelled with a sense of quiet pride. She had survived the storm. The audience, sensing the change, began to shift their attention. Whispers of admiration for the woman and her family replaced the earlier murmurs of shock and discomfort. The room's energy transformed, and the mistress, once the dominant figure, could only observe. Her attempts to command attention and intimidate were now futile. The room had recognized the true strength and dignity of the woman, and the mistress's presence was diminished. The woman's mind reflected on the evening. She remembered the fear, the trembling hands, the tears she had tried to hide. She remembered the mistress's words, sharp and cutting, designed to wound. And now she thought about the quiet support of her family, the strength it provided, and the way the audience had responded. She realized that her endurance, combined with their presence, had created a turning point. The humiliation that had once seemed unbearable had been transformed into a moment of empowerment. The mistress, recognizing that her influence had waned, began to withdraw. She moved carefully, her steps measured, her smile subdued. The energy in the room no longer favored her. She had lost the silent battle of perception and control. The woman, meanwhile, stood confidently, her composure intact, her presence strengthened by the family's quiet authority. The audience could see the shift, and the hall seemed to hum with a subtle acknowledgement of the evening's true dynamic. The woman's heart was steady now, her breathing calm. She had faced public humiliation, endured scrutiny, and maintained her dignity throughout. She had discovered a strength within herself that she had not fully realized before. The family's presence had been a catalyst, but the woman's resilience had been the foundation. Together, they had confronted cruelty and arrogance with unity and quiet authority. The room had witnessed the transformation, and it left a lasting impression on everyone present. Guests continued to observe, some openly impressed, others whispering softly, sharing their thoughts on the events of the evening. The mistress's earlier dominance was now a memory, a contrast to the woman's newfound strength and dignity. The woman, supported and confident, moved through the hall with grace. Each step, each gesture, conveyed resilience and composure. The atmosphere was filled with a subtle respect that had not been present earlier. The mistress, facing the reality of her diminished influence, finally chose to leave the spotlight. She moved away cautiously, her steps measured, her confidence replaced by uncertainty. The audience's attention followed her briefly, then returned to the woman and her family. The hall, once a stage for mockery and tension, had been transformed into a space of admiration and respect. The woman's endurance, combined with the family's quiet authority, had created a memorable moment that would linger in the minds of those present. The woman allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. She had survived the ordeal, maintained her dignity, and reclaimed her space. The power of unity, support, and resilience had triumphed over arrogance and cruelty. She felt a sense of closure, a recognition that she had faced the challenge and emerged stronger. The evening had been difficult, but it had also been transformative. She had discovered her own strength, and the support of those who truly cared for her had reinforced it. As the gala continued, the woman moved with confidence, engaging politely with other guests, her composure intact. Her family remained close, providing subtle support without overwhelming her presence. The mistress, now less imposing, lingered in the background, her attempts at influence largely ineffective. The room had witnessed the true dynamic, and respect had shifted to the woman and her supporters. The woman felt a sense of empowerment she had never experienced before. She had endured public humiliation, faced scrutiny, and maintained her composure. She had discovered the strength to stand tall, to reclaim her dignity, and to navigate the social environment with confidence. The experience, though challenging, had revealed her resilience and capacity for grace under pressure. The gala, once a stage for tension and mockery, had become a testament to dignity, strength, and support. The woman's endurance, combined with the presence of her family, had transformed a moment of vulnerability into a moment of empowerment. Guests would remember the shift, the way humility and support overcame arrogance and cruelty. The woman's journey through the evening had been a demonstration of quiet strength and resilience. As the night drew to a close, the woman felt a sense of satisfaction and closure. She had faced the mistress's taunts, endured public humiliation, and emerged with her dignity intact. The support of her family had been instrumental, but her own strength had been the foundation. The audience had witnessed a transformation, a reclaiming of power, and a triumph of resilience over arrogance. The evening had left a lasting impression, a story of endurance, dignity, and the quiet strength that emerges when one is supported and believes in oneself.